Welcome everyone to the fifth and final wake-up show here at the South Rotunda in Glasgow. I'm Axel Threlfall, editor-at-large with Reuters. The overall COP theme today is cities, regions and the built environment. Here at the GHS hub, we're throwing transport into the mix as well. Our focus will be on the UK, but we plan to draw from best practice all over the world this morning. How do we transition to greener homes? How do we decarbonize our transport systems? What are the right finance and policy approaches required to make these things happen? As always, we've got a super panel lined up for you. I'll introduce them in just a moment. Couple of headlines worth a mention. A surprise joint statement from the US and China last night that they'll work together to limit global warming. The world's two biggest emitters will focus on measures to reduce methane emissions and tackle deforestation. We'll get reaction from the Hong Kong Environment Secretary to that announcement in a moment. Relevant also to our discussions this morning, a group of countries, companies and cities committed yesterday to phasing out fossil fuel vehicles by 2040. There is a but, though. The world's top two car makers, Toyota and VW, as well as major car markets, China, the US and Germany, did not sign up to that. Just before I introduce my guests, we go live first to the City of London and to the London Stock Exchange, where the market is just about to open. This morning, the Lord Mayor of London, Alderman William Russell, is overseeing proceedings. This will be his final official act as Lord Mayor after 2 years in office. Alongside him is Don Robert, chair of the London Stock Exchange, which last week here in Glasgow launched an exciting initiative to drive transparency and liquidity by creating a new carbon solution which facilitates the public listing of climate funds. So lots happening this morning. Let's get straight over to the London Stock Exchange.
It's great to have a live market opening again with real people, real guests, and may I say, my Lord Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It is my great honor to welcome you here this morning in two capacities. Firstly, as chairman of the London Stock Exchange Group, and secondly, as a supporting chair of Chapter Zero, a fantastic organization. So with COP26 and the Green Horizon Summit now drawing to a close, I think no one can be in doubt that the industrial transition to a net zero economy is accelerating. The role of industry and specifically finance has been front and center in Glasgow, and I'm certain that we'll look back on COP26 as a watershed moment. There's now unequivocal recognition from policymakers of the crucial role that finance has to play in the mechanism that can turn the billions currently committed to net zero into the trillions that are needed. And critical to this being achieved is the dialogue between companies and investors to facilitate the flow of capital toward transition and the growth of the green economy. As board members and leaders, each of us has an essential role to play in tackling the climate emergency and supporting executive teams through the transition choices that their businesses have to make. Chapter Zero, the UK branch of the Global Climate Governance Initiative, is supporting boards around the world to address climate change in their own businesses, equipping them with the skills and the knowledge to make climate a boardroom priority. We've seen the emphasis that government is placing on this with the recent announcement from the UK government detailing its intent to require companies to set and disclose their net zero strategies. Here at LSEG, our commitment to the economy-wide transition is one that we take very seriously, taking responsibility for the impact of our own operations and supply chain, and importantly, the actions required to decarbonize them. We are, of course, a market infrastructure provider, and one of the world's leading providers of data, indices, and analytics. So we have an important role to play in providing all of the necessary plumbing and the architecture to support the transition of how the world reallocates capital over the next few decades. You may have seen some of the tangible actions that we have been taking around here. At the end of last week, we detailed plans to develop a new market solution in the voluntary carbon markets, accelerating the availability of financing to projects that will further support a just transition to a low-carbon economy. Together with investment firms representing 40 trillion of assets, LSEG has also backed the launch of a new research center at the London School of Economics. It's called the Global TPI Climate Transition Center. And this new facility will provide investors with clear, consistent, and comparable assessments of the climate change plans of more than 10,000 businesses. And of course, there are plans to scale further. In our recent launch of the Climate Governance Score for London issuers, helping the market to align on regulatory requirements and also providing climate reporting guidance through our work with the United Nations Sustainable Stock Exchanges initiatives. So climate change is the most urgent challenge we face, and it's collaboration and commitment, as we have seen throughout COP26, that will help us rise to the challenge. Now, it's also Remembrance Day, and I wanted to take just a moment to pay tribute to the sacrifice and the contribution of our armed forces, past and present, and their families. Our own war memorial, just out in front of the main entrance to this building, lists the names of over 650 members of the stock exchange who gave their lives in the Boer War, the First World War, and the Second World War. And indeed, the only time the stock exchange has ever closed was at the beginning of the First World War. As a result of that closure, the stock exchange battalion of Fusiliers was formed for the 1,600 who volunteered service, and similar acts occurred across the city. I know the stockbrokers battalion was also formed in the financial sector in 1914, which eventually turned into today's London Regiment. So their sacrifices embedded deeply in our history, and I'm proud that LSEG continues to recognize the value and the contribution of the UK Armed Forces. And in fact, we're a signatory here to the Armed Forces Covenant that commits support to veterans and reservists and their families, and our veteran support network called Vision promotes a greater understanding of the sacrifices and the contributions made by veterans and their families, while giving colleagues the opportunity to learn from their values and experiences. But finally, before I invite the Lord Mayor to say a few words, I hope you'll join me in congratulating Alderman William Russell in the leading role that he's played in the Green Horizons Summit very recently, along with his efforts over the last few years to grow the green finance in the UK economy. So, my Lord Mayor, we are most honored to host you today. Please welcome the Lord Mayor.
Good morning to everyone joining us here in London and in Glasgow. I was up there last week, and it was a great event, has been throughout the last 2 weeks. And thank you very much, Don, for your kind words and for having me here to open the markets on the London Stock Exchange. Who would have believed when I started my career in the city at first Boston in 1987 and then Merrill Lynch, went to Merrill Lynch in 1992, I would have ever dreamt of opening the London Stock Exchange. Anyway, one of these dreams can sometimes come true. So that has been a great moment. And we're also marking, as Don said, the final day of the Green Horizons Summit at COP26, which has been delivered by the City of London Corporation and the Green Finance Institute. Now, as Alderman of Bread Street, what more could I want than be in my own ward here, opening, as I said, the London Stock Exchange? And thank you to LSEG for being such a supporter not only of everything in the city, but also of personally myself as voters in my ward. But also the other thing which you mentioned, which it is Remembrance Day today, which many of you wouldn't know, and actually Don wouldn't know, but the Stockbrokers Regiment of 1914 was founded by my great-great-uncle, who was Lord Mayor in 1913, 1914. So very proud to hear that mentioned today as well. And this opening of the London Stock Exchange will be one of my last acts of my mayoralty. And given how much of a green mayoralty this has been, it's very fitting that it should conclude with the Green Horizon Summit, ensuring that we mobilise private finance for net zero, that we continue to green finance and finance green. It is an important symbol of our commitment to this cause to open the markets here at the London Stock Exchange, one of the most sustainable exchanges in the world. The exchange, which issued the world's first certified green bonds and green covered bonds from China, India, and the Middle East, home to 260 sustainability-related bonds from 23 countries, which have raised over £56 billion. And now home to the transition bond segment to provide transition finance for high-emitting companies. This is the most crucial work which will take place here, in my view. My message throughout COP26 has been that money talks, and it is telling us, go green or go home. This COP has been the finance COP. And I know that my friend Mark Carney has done an outstanding job with GFANZ getting commitments of $130 trillion. So the money's there, and now we need the projects, and we need to deliver with that money. So it's my sense that we're really moving forward in the right green direction. The City of London will continue to be at the forefront of finding and funding the solutions the planet needs. Together we have the tools, the capital, and the will. And Vincent Keaveney will take over, Alderman Vincent Keaveney will take over on tomorrow after the silent ceremony, and it's always a good sign to have an Irishman taking over because the green element is there naturally, and so he will continue on with that. So look, through the Green Horizon Summit, we're making sure that capital can be directed into the real world projects which will enable the worldwide transition to net zero. So thank you all here at LZEG for making this possible today, and I'm confident that the future's bright, the future is green. Thank you. And now I hand back to my friend Axel in the Sir Roger Gifford studio up in Glasgow. Axel, back to you.
All right, thank you, Lord Mayor. Alderman William Russell, of course, overseeing proceedings at the London Stock Exchange, together with Don Robert, chair of the London Stock Exchange. Let me just introduce the panel that we've got lined up for you this morning here in the studio in Glasgow. Donald Brenninkmeijer, chair of Built by Nature at the Laudes Foundation. Isabella Gornall is chair of the UK 100s board, and Eric Hannon is a partner from McKinsey, leading the EU travel, transport and sustainability practice, McKinsey. We also await, live from Hong Kong, the Environment Secretary, KS Wong. As soon as he comes up, we will go over to Hong Kong. But let me kick it off with the panel here in Glasgow. And Donald, I want to start with you. I spoke with a colleague. I had a colleague of yours, Leslie Johnson, in this studio last week, and the question, really the overarching question to her was, is this philanthropy's time to step up in this space now, in the climate space? What do you say?
I think absolutely. I think we need all forms of capital to address the challenges that we have. And I think that philanthropy can play a really crucial role as a real catalyst for taking risks, supporting innovations, supporting breakthrough technologies, and bringing people together in a way that maybe other capital can't. And so that's exactly what we're trying to do. With, for example, Built by Nature, we're trying to bring together a network of all of the different stakeholders to really address the challenges within the built environment.
One thing I pushed with Leslie was, what is it, less than 2% of the capital in your space is dedicated to climate. How quickly can we start to see that rise that level? Because of course that's sort of critical, and the risks you're prepared to take with it, that sort of capital and the risks you're prepared to take with it is critical.
Well, I watched the panel from last week, and I thought what was brilliant was the comment around smart climate solutions. And actually, when we talk about the different areas where philanthropy plays a role, how do we consider climate in all of those activities, be that in education, for example, be that in actual climate solutions themselves? I mean, no doubt we need to accelerate the amount of money that goes into finding climate solutions. And the 2% is too low, without a doubt. But I think events like this actually start to bring together the world and bring together those that say we need to make changes, we need to invest, we need to use different forms of capital and direct also our efforts towards the climate.
And we'll come, by the way, back to Built by Nature just after we've been to Hong Kong. Isabella, we've talked all of last week, particularly with Mark Carney here in the studio and the GFANS piece, about private capital and how to leverage that, how to catalyze the public money there and really get the private capital piece working. I guess this is no different at the local level.
No, not at all. And I think, I mean, just to give a little bit of context, UK 100 is a very unique network of over 80 local authorities. And when you have 30% of emission reduction actually required to take place at local authority level, it just shows the impact and the investment that we need at this local level. And UK 100 recently realised that even just with £5 billion worth of investment, whether that was from government or other sources, that would unlock over £100 billion of investment.
I mean, we hear numbers like that. I mean, we heard numbers like that last week. The bit of public to really catalyse the private, and you've just thrown some numbers out there. What are we actually seeing though on the ground that is proof that this is actually happening and this can work?
Well, for example, the government recently announced in the budget that they were going to give over £100 million towards Teesside, and that was going to help them create 800 jobs. But that was an oven-ready deal, whereas actually you've got other cities such as Bristol and Leeds and Nottingham who actually have got ideas, but they need to be able to scale them up, whereas actually the government is not investing in them at these early stages, whereas actually if they came in a lot faster and were able to invest in them at the earlier stages, you'd see a lot more impact a lot earlier. So I think rather than waiting for these oven-ready deals, as they like, being able to bring it in earlier would actually transform a lot. But we haven't seen very much from the investment bank yet, and we need to see more.
Okay, hold that thought, Isabella. And Erica, apologies I haven't come to you, but we have the Secretary ready in Hong Kong now. And as I said at the top, we got the surprise joint statement from the US and China last night that they're going to work together on global warming. KS Wong is the Secretary of the Environment from Hong Kong and joins us now. Secretary, very, very nice to talk with you again. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, very good.
Very good. Look, but before we delve into the updated climate action plan for Hong Kong and the clean air plan for Hong Kong, let me just get your reaction to yesterday evening's US-China announcement. Obviously, this has a large bearing on what goes on in Hong Kong. Can we just get a quick comment from you on that?
I think all of us should be glad to see closer collaborations on climate actions. So we are seeing the largest economies are going to work closer on decarbonization. I think we see it positively, right?
Yeah. Are you surprised by the announcement that we heard last night? Are you surprised that this sort of cooperation and collaboration is now going to happen?
My personal feeling is that China is committed to decarbonizing deeply, okay? So that's my feeling personally and also through different working channels. So I think it's normal to see China try to explore different means to collaborate with other economies to honor the Paris Agreement and to address the climate change.
Okay, and you and I have in the past talked about regional cooperation between Hong Kong and the mainland, and regional collaboration. What do those conversations look like now, given, of course, a large part of your problem in Hong Kong is smog coming over from the mainland, right?
I think you're talking about, say, the air quality could be a regional challenge. So Hong Kong are working with other cities in the Greater Bay Area to improve it. In fact, in the past, say, 10 years, Hong Kong's overall air quality has improved by 40 to 60%. So it's contributed by Hong Kong and also full collaboration with the Greater Bay Area cities. And I would like to highlight that no matter it's a regional challenge or for global improvement in terms of climate actions, Hong Kong should contribute. And you know that Hong Kong is a finance center, and through our efforts on strengthening the green finance aspect, I think Hong Kong can help the region and also other economies to make it smart and timely investment to further address the climate change.
Yeah. You know, on the Climate Action Plan 2050, I know there are the 4 strategies as part of this, and I'll come on to some of those, because today here we're talking about built environment, we're talking about transport. But let me ask you first, how do you, Secretary, balance your strategy, your planning between tackling, you know, on the one hand, the huge emissions from power generation, and then on the other hand, the more localized roadside air quality issues, the traffic issues, the emissions from transport?
Okay, in Hong Kong, there are 3 major air quality pollution sources: power plants, road transport, and marine transport. In fact, through efforts in the past, Hong Kong's power generation is no longer the biggest air pollution sources, not even the road transport. Marine transport becomes the biggest sources because we have invested a lot in the electricity generation and roadside air quality improvement. So we're working on these 3 aspects. For instance, for power generation, we are working with the 2 power companies in Hong Kong to phase out the coal portion and to increase the use of natural gas as the transitional energy, at the same time to increase the more renewable energy and other zero carbon energy sources. Certainly, in these days, we feel the challenges in the fuel mix and energy balance, because we have to provide a very reliable electricity supply and also to concern about the affordability, at the same time to further decarbonize and improve the environmental performance. And I have confidence to say that Hong Kong's, in balancing this objective, is one of the best performers in the world. Hong Kong's tariff level is much lower than other cities, say, in Asia, like Singapore, Tokyo, and much cheaper than London and New York. But our carbon intensity and also in terms of tariff level is also very good. So I think we are doing pretty good. But the challenge is more about the transportation.
Yeah.
On pirate cars, I said last time, we are pretty good. 1 out of every 5 new pirate cars is EV in this year. That is the best, highest level in the entire Asia. But we still have to tackle the commercial vehicles. So we're going to try out hydrogen and also electric buses in the coming time.
And how much money is Hong Kong investing in this, on the transport side?
Okay, I don't have the exact figures with me, but as mentioned in the new Climate Action Plan, we are going to invest more than 200 billion Hong Kong dollars in the coming 15 to 20 years on climate mitigation and adaptation. And a significant portion of them are on transport.
Another part of another one of the strategies is, of course, on energy saving and green buildings, and this is something we're going to talk about in the studio here as well. What is Hong Kong doing to innovate in new building design, in building composition as well?
Okay, you know, Hong Kong is a very compact, high-density city. So when we look at the energy in relation to building, in Hong Kong's particular context, we should focus on the overall built environment through a compact built form that would be the most environmentally friendly. In the past 5 years, we saved about 4.7% of the overall electricity consumption in Hong Kong. And through the new climate action plan, we set a new target on both commercial buildings and also residential buildings. And Hong Kong government would like to be a leader. So we set a new target, is 5 years to further improve the overall energy performance by 6%. And another initiative is that we have the carbon neutral partnership initiative. We are asking all the big developers and also institutions to make their own pledge, including towards carbon neutrality. So there are 60 biggest organizations in Hong Kong that we met last month. About 70% of them has already made their pledge towards carbon neutrality or planning to do so. And they're going to further develop their plan, including saving energy. Because these big organizations are owning and managing a large portion of commercial buildings that represent several high levels of the electricity consumption in Hong Kong.
Yep.
So for the government's leadership, and also this partnership, we can set a very good standard.
Can I ask you just a couple of final things? Again, sticking with buildings and materials and composition, what are the innovations that excite you most in that space?
Okay, certainly the biggest challenge is how to improve the performance of existing buildings. So for the government and private sector collaboration, we introduced an idea called visual commissioning. That's similar to tuning a vehicle that through relatively simple and smart investment, we can significantly improve the performance of the building within a short time with minimal investment. So that's something that Hong Kong has been trying to explore in the past few years, and now it's pretty mature. So we export it to other cities in the Greater Bay Area and even to Shanghai and Beijing so that we can learn from that and apply the visual commissioning smart technology.
Final question, Secretary. Clearly one of the big issues here for the past week or so has been public money working together with capital from the private side, the multi-stakeholder approach, if you like. What sort of buy-in has Hong Kong achieved from private investors and organizations to realize a lot of what you're hoping to realize?
I think the response is pretty encouraging. A few years ago, the government started to issue green bonds and also support a quasi-government body to set up the systems on green bond and green finance. And now we are seeing the results. More and more the developers and big corporations are working on that, including issuing green bonds to subsidize and also support their relevant projects. And through also the Hong Kong Exchange that are going to tighten the regulations on ESG requirements so that more listed companies, big companies in towns, are going to improve the transparency about that. So there are different initiatives in Hong Kong that can support bigger investments towards the environmentally friendly and lower carbon transformations.
All right, Secretary Wong, very nice to talk with you again. Many thanks for your thoughts and many thanks for your comments in reaction to the US-China announcement last night. Secretary Wong, thank you very much. I want to get back to our panel and actually bounce a few of the things we heard there off you. And Donald, look. I tried to push him on materials and composition. You know, I wanted him to mention wood because let's get to this the Built by Nature initiative. Just very quickly, tell us exactly what that is.
So Built by Nature was something that we launched 2 weeks ago. It's both a network as well as an accelerator fund that aims to propel and accelerate the use of timber in the built environment as a substitute for steel and cement. and in doing so, accelerate the transition to a low-carbon built environment.
And how is that? How is that going? I guess. I mean, you say you're 2 weeks in. I mean, there must be skepticism surrounding this initiative.
Sure, I think that we're at the start of this journey. I mean, there is already history of building with wood that goes back generations and even centuries, and you can go to many countries in the world and see domestic buildings built out of wood. I think where we are at the moment is that the industry itself also recognizes the clear potential that timber plays as an alternative solution. So cross-laminated timber really does have the characteristics that can also replace or substitute steel and cement as part of hybrid solutions in larger buildings as well as also domestic buildings.
What sort of reaction do you think you'd get if we'd mentioned that to the Secretary just now in terms of building in Hong Kong?
Well, so one of the things I think that the challenges of Hong Kong is very much the built environment's already established.
Yeah.
And I think that when we look at timber, one of the things that we look at is the growth of the built environment overall. So we know that in the next 30 years, the built environment is going to double in size from where it is today. We know that a city the size of Paris is built every single week, and therefore we need to look at solutions to all of that new build and say, how can we introduce timber as an alternative, as a solution that really addresses the carbon emissions of a new building. I think also in retrofits, there's a role for timber, there's a role for bio-based materials, but that's much harder. And I think that the current view that we see around the world is very much, let's address the operating carbon, where we can also address things around energy usage, shifting towards more renewables, which is all part of the solution.
Yeah.
But at the same time, whenever we do a retrofit, how can we also incorporate new materials like timber as part of that solution?
Okay. Isabella, I want to get your thoughts on this in just a second. But Eric, let me bring you in here. Again, bouncing off what we heard from the Secretary. I know your remit is Europe, is the EU. But are you impressed by what countries, what areas like Hong Kong, regions like Hong Kong are doing in the EV space, the EV infrastructure planning? And, what can we learn from them?
I mean, what we're seeing in a dense area, as the Secretary said, they're at about 20% EV sales this year. Actually, in Europe, we're probably going to hit something similar this year for 2021. We'll probably end around 20% of EV sales. And what I wouldn't underestimate is the pace of change that represents, right? Pre-pandemic, we were low single-digit percent across Europe. And so this is moving from, kind of crazy early adopters to really a mainstream solution that can that most people can adopt. And I think what's really exciting about places like Hong Kong and what we're seeing here is that transport is one of the few sectors globally where we can actually have a net cost savings to society as we decarbonize, right? So long term, fundamentally, electric transport is cheaper transport. And we're almost there now in some segments, right? So having a total net benefit to society, both economically and for the climate, makes, I think, the transport sector an exciting sector.
It's fascinating because I guess one of the issues is communicating that to the consumer, right? We had Mark Campanella in here from Carbon Tracker last week, and he sat in that chair where Isabella's sitting and said, look, I was in a cab last night and I started chatting to the cab driver, and we basically came to the conclusion if this guy ran an electric vehicle, he would save this much money every week. But the cab driver didn't know that. That hadn't been communicated effectively to the cab driver. I mean, this is one of the big challenges, right?
It is, but for me, that's overcomable, and we're overcoming that, right? So just the awareness of EV solutions is 10x bigger than it was just a couple of years ago from a consumer mindset point of view. Also, we're finding solutions that help people like the cab driver that you're mentioning actually get into electric transport. So for him, normally the upfront capital cost is often prohibitive because EVs are expensive. It's you have the savings on the operating costs. So we're seeing solutions where we shift the CapEx to OpEx for people, right, to kind of spread out that upfront burden over time. And so I think now that we're getting into the mainstream stage, we're seeing solutions to help exactly that.
Isabella, Andy Burnham was supposed to be with us this morning, and of course that to look at the local level as well, and the challenges local authorities face. How do local authorities balance their net zero ambitions with all the other responsibilities that they face? I mean, and the constrained budgets. I mean, what is the message you're hearing?
Well, I think having spoken to quite a few local authority leaders yesterday. The main thing is that actually the powers that they have and the whole economy approach that they have is actually quite unique, because they do have to think about social care, they do have to think about waste and resources, and that is what net zero is all about. It's not just about energy, it's about everything. So actually the fact that they do have the powers to be able to oversee the wider economy does make it work, but yet not one size fits all. They're all very unique, and that's why you can't just create a single template and say to them all, you must go and do this. They have different demographics, they have different local resources, and actually being able to work with them to map them out and say, okay, we need to be helping you with wind or with solar or with tidal or with different types of generation is really important. I spoke to an Australian member of Parliament yesterday, and he was saying for them, they have solar panels on the majority of homes across Australia, and yet they have no battery storage.
Right.
And it's that sort of unique aspect for local areas, and actually being able to think of the local solutions.
Putting you on the spot a little bit here, but if you look across the UK, who would you hold up as best in class? Who's doing it well? Who can we learn from in the UK? I mean, I don't know if the Andy Burnhams and Greater Manchesters are good examples of that. Not just in terms of what they're doing, but the sort of financing they're looking to get: local government, local climate bonds, local authority pension funds, etc., etc.
Yeah, I would say Leeds is doing really well, and actually they have already mapped out the investment that they need. They've worked out all of their ESG requirements, and they are pushing the Treasury and the new UK Investment Bank to actually allocate this, and for them to say you must include net zero in your remit now, so that we can then access all of this finance. But again, we're not quite there yet, and what we really need to see is the Treasury investing in BEIS, in the business department, for them to be able to map out local pipeline projects. And again, I feel like this is the gap that we need to be filled.
To Donald and Eric, feel free to come in, or any of you, feel free to jump in on any of this. But Donald, back to you. Where's global leadership coming from in terms of cities adapting efficiently and effectively to climate change?
I think that there are several examples across Europe happening at the moment. To name a few, I think in Holland there's an organisation called Holland Houtland, which looks very much at financing and valuation models that are different to scale bio-based homes across Holland. In Germany, I think that the Bauhaus der Erde is an initiative that really is gaining momentum across Europe. Barcelona is a city. Next year it's going to be the city, the forest city of Europe, and there the Institute of Advanced Architecture in Catalonia is really showcasing how wood can be used as a new material in the construction space. So
these are the cities that when we look at the regenerative, circular economy piece, they're the ones that inspire you most.
Absolutely. And Scandinavia, you've got to also add them in. I mean, they've got a history of both forestry.
Anywhere in Asia?
Asia's not really an area that we're looking at. Okay. It's a sort of, what we're focusing on, certainly within Built by Nature, is harnessing the opportunities in Europe and then taking that onto the global scale. So we focused our efforts initially on Europe. I think we welcome any innovation that comes from anywhere. I saw last week, for example, also the Pacific Ocean states announcing that they wanted to come together to create joint collective demand for timber as a new resource in the built environment. And therefore we say, well, how can we also maybe stimulate that also in Europe, for example? So ideas can come from anywhere.
Good. Sorry, Eric, were you going to jump in?
Axel, I find your focus on cities interesting and compelling, because I think what we are seeing is that where a lot of national governments maybe have been paralyzed to act in the past, although we hope things like COP26 can accelerate that, a lot of global cities are acting much more aggressively than the national governments. And the cities generally represent a vast majority of the carbon. And the sectors that we're talking about here, built environment and transport, right? A lot of the cities like C40 cities and cities like that are really pushing the envelope of decarbonization faster than national governments.
At the top of the show this morning, I mentioned this announcement yesterday. I forget what the title of the initiative is, but a group of countries, companies, cities committing to phase out fossil fuel vehicles by 2040, I think it was. But there were a couple of big emissions there. On the corporate side, Toyota and VW. And we'll come to why in a second. I think I know why. And then, of course, some big emissions on the national side: China, the US, Germany. On the automaker bit, is it because these are automakers that sell a lot to countries like Russia?
Yeah, I think what we're going to see across automakers is that the more that their footprint is Western European or North American, they probably feel that they can be a bit faster than in other regions where just the infrastructure doesn't support a quicker shift to electrification. I think what's exciting about the announcement that came out is that actually when you look across the announcement, there's not a whole lot new in there that the different companies who announced committed more to. Rather, this is the first time they've committed in a collaborative way, right? That we're saying as an industry and as a set of regions, we're going to work together to meet these targets rather than acting individually like that.
Am I right in being surprised that VW isn't in there? Am I right in being surprised that Germany as a nation isn't part of this?
Yeah, well, I think Germany came on the record and said that they think that to get to fully net zero, that they're going to look for sustainable fuels, but that are still combustion fuels. So I think now we're getting into the real technicalities of what a fully net zero shift is. But regardless of the announcement last week, I think the direction of travel is clear, right? Fundamentally, the future of net zero transport is going to be electric transport, at least for passenger vehicle, right? We haven't even talked yet about hydrogen for some of the harder to abate transport sectors, but the direction of travel is clear. We're going to electrify.
Yeah. Just coming back to, and I'll come back to that, but I want to talk a little bit about the role of technology and the use of technology, both in your space, but also the local level. How are local authorities? How do they manage the technology bit? And where are you seeing clever uses of technology?
Well, I think where you have smart partnerships, for example, with EV charging firms in inner cities and apps that work, but we are still seeing things failing, like people turning up with their electric vehicle and none of the charge points work, and they're not being serviced. And all of these things that set us back as a sector in terms of trying to move things forward. But I think also around greener homes is very exciting, and the UK government has set a very ambitious target to build new homes, and building in new sets of technologies around heat pumps, solar, insulation, all of these things that for us seem a little bit basic, but actually are not part of most of the current housing stock.
No, and also, I imagine very few people. Do people know how heat pumps work?
No.
Right. I mean,
No.
that's a problem, right?
Yeah, it is an issue, and this comes back to your communications point. And what we really need is a big national-wide communications program, and this needs to come post COP, right? I mean, there's been so much focus on it, but we need to be able to actually communicate to the consumer and say, actually, we understand about your energy bills.
Is the UK government good at doing that?
No, but this is what we need them to do.
Right.
I mean, because...
So are you pushing them?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
I just also add, I think that next to the consumer, I think that, for example, in the built environment, the role of the architects, the role of the designers is absolutely fundamental, because most of the time, in terms of the material usage or the types of energy that are available, is actually recommended by those experts. And it's bringing them along on this journey. It's educating them about the opportunities and the technologies that are actually available that can then bring those into either retrofits or also new build.
Yeah. I mean, what technology? I mean, obviously, built by nature, we're looking at wood and timber construction. What technology really excites you? In the space that you're in now.
Well, I think in the sheer fact that you can look at wood and say, as wood grows, it captures carbon, it sequesters the carbon, it stores the carbon, and then all of a sudden you can, develop that and process it into all parts of a home. Be that also, the wood, the furniture, and that's done in a way that's totally recyclable, renewable, reusable also at the end of life. And I was recently in a building in London, 6 Orsman Road, where we launched Built by Nature, and you walk in and just the sheer kind of the feeling that you get of walking into a natural nature home gives you this sense of well-being, and it actually makes you feel good. That's when you start to say, okay, fine, it's a shell, it's start of the journey. You then start to add in things around heat pumps, if that's the way that the energy is created. You all of a sudden start to feel that you're contributing, be that as the asset owner, be that as the user of the building, so the employee that goes to work in a building like that. They're all part of a sort of, how do we feel better actually contributing to the solutions that we need to see?
Yeah. Eric, just coming back to the public and private capital bit, is in terms of transport and EV infrastructure and that shift, what sort of positive examples of the leveraging and catalyzing of private capital are we seeing in that space?
Well, you mentioned infrastructure. I think the rollout of infrastructure, charging infrastructure here in Europe, it's one of the largest deployments of capital in the mobility industry that we've seen in a long time. Next to that is then the rollout of also battery capacity and European battery capacity. Billions and billions of euros of private capital are flowing into that. And I think what's exciting is it's such a dynamic environment. You see both incumbents who are trying to shift their business model towards an electrified transport business model away from combustion and oil and gas, and you also see a really vibrant startup market as well. So I don't think we're missing the inflow of capital to create that infrastructure. I think what we're seeing is before the infrastructure, that's where some of the pinch points are. Right?
Very wary on the time, and I want to get a final thought from each of you, but very quickly on the alternative fuels, the hydrogens, sustainable aviation fuel.
Yeah.
What are investors taking most seriously right now, would you say?
So for the hard to abate sectors, you're talking, right? So the hard to abate sectors where really decarbonization is going to be a little farther out. When we talk about sustainable aviation fuels, I think people are focusing on synthetic fuels, on hydrogen-based fuels. That's kind of where we're expecting to go. But that's not as near-term obvious a solution, I don't think, as passenger vehicles, where we've got a near-term decarbonization.
Yeah. Okay. Look, a final thought from each of you, and it is a sort of final sort of overview COP thought. Donald, let me start with you. We slightly lackluster yesterday after the first draft of the whole bit came out and everyone was saying there's not enough in here. Then, of course, we got the US-China announcement last night. Everyone got really quite excited by the sort of momentum that has created. Everyone extremely excited by the GFANS bid and the Mark Carney bid and the what is it, $130 trillion of capital sitting there. What do you go away with?
I go away with the challenges remain very real. 40% of all emissions are in the built environment. We need to address operating carbon. We need to address embodied carbon. We can only do that if we work together. Architects, developers, insurers, investors, even the consumer, cities, governments. We need to have policy. We need to have regulations over time to be able to measure what we do and then also create the innovations and scale the innovations to really be able to have a net zero solution that works for us in the built environment.
Eric, by all accounts, from what you've said, you're encouraged by the ability to collaborate in the transport space. The initiative that we heard yesterday. Is that top of your list when you leave?
Yeah, I think my industry after this COP is a fundamentally different industry than it was at the last COP. Right, this is an industry that is aggressively moving towards the net zero equation, right, with a set and a level of commitments and even voluntary commitments that would have been unheard of at the last COP. So I think there's a lot of reason for hope that this is an industry that's driving towards achieving the net zero target.
Okay, and Isabella, does Boris Johnson go home? I know he took the train home yesterday, but does he get lots of pats on the back in Parliament, in Downing Street, in the corridors of power, at what a actually quite successful meeting this has been, or is it more of a probably could have done a little bit better?
I think yes. I think that there have been some brilliant things that have come out of this, but we haven't seen the final text yet. So let's wait and see. My final line would be, it's brilliant to see such high-level things that are on this global stage, but if we don't give access to local authorities, we're not going to reach net zero.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Isabella Gornall, Donald Brenninkmeijer and Eric Hannon, thank you very much indeed for being with us. Thank you for your patience at the start when we went to the London Stock Exchange as well. Look, that is it for the fifth and final show. Thank you very much indeed for joining us all of last week and, of course, today for our final show. It's been a great pleasure. I'm Axel Threlfall at Reuters. We hope to see you all again very soon. Thanks very much.